Good evening. Not wanting to come in between the top and all of you, we have a slight change of plan. The governor will have to leave in the middle. So we'll introduce you quickly to the evening. First of all, madam, it's a great pride to have you with us. It is not only a pride, but at the same time, it's a blessing for Auditorium française. This is the first time you have come here. Thank you so much. Today evening is a very special evening. This is about smart cities, probably to be delivered to you with somebody who's probably the smartest in the field. Anil Menon is the global president Cisco. I remember a few years back I was going on the drive in the crash in Abu Dhabi, and suddenly I asked my driver to stop the car because I saw a huge banner with Anil's photo, and this was for the World Economic Forum, and there were quotations from him. So we have somebody like him here who's going to talk to us about, I'm not going to give you his biodata, but he's also been the vice chairperson for the World Economic Forum. He's been with the Harvard Business think tank. A lot of other past beautiful things that he has done, but today we hope to get some down-to-earth practical advice and suggestions for smart cities. Pondichéry is talking about it. France has already shown interest in it. Thank you so much. With this, we welcome you. Thank you, Anil.
Good evening. This is Pondichéry, so I'm going to do it one more time. Good evening. There you go. Thank you, Lalit, for that introduction, for the kind introduction, as I like to say. That's the one that your wife would like to believe, but only your mother will. It is a pleasure for me to be here. And Governor Kiran, Bedi, thank you for taking time to be here. Let me start with what I want to cover, because this is something that I'm working with my team for the last 7 years, and we have a lot of passion around this topic because we believe that this is critically important for the world's future. So I'm going to talk a little bit from a global point of view as it deals with smart cities, but I do have a context which is, as a company, Cisco, we are working very closely with France. We just signed what we call a country digitization acceleration program with President Hollande, and we are investing heavily in France. One of the areas that I overlook in all the country transformation, which is UK, Germany, Italy, and Israel, and also in India, and we are picking 5 more countries that we will focus on where we would invest tremendously. We're also trying to look at connections between the countries. So given Pondichéry's connection to France, given Pondichéry's importance to India, this is an area of great interest to me, not only because I happen to have a friend here, Lalit, but also because I think this is important for us as a company to work a topic for us to work on here in Pondi. So let me, by the way, my daughter was the one who came up. She said she's going to give the speech, and I said no, so we negotiated that she would just come up and then she would go down. So I appreciate your indulgence, Governor Bedi, that she was up here. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to talk about this area that has become extraordinarily important, but I want to provide a context. And what I want to do is, I don't want to come across suggesting that I know what Pondichéry needs, so I'm not going to make any recommendations. The point is that you know what Pondichéry needs, and you've forgotten more about what Pondichéry needs than I know. But I will give you some global experiences, some things that we're working on. However, I do want to give a context for this within India's smart cities. I have been involved with the India Smart City project for the last 5 years, going back when the Prime Minister was the Chief Minister in Gujarat with GIFT, where I was involved and we invested into GIFT and all the different, because we chased every opportunity on urbanization in India, because as a company we believe that if you're not relevant in India, we're not going to be relevant in the world, given the importance of India. What I am going to do though first is say what I'm not going to talk about. And I want to first say that smart cities as a topic is too important to be left to the technology companies. You can't trust us with that, because we will come up with solutions that are just absolutely wrong for you. So let me start with what I think is a smart city. Smart city has nothing to do with digitization, with technology, with cameras, with sensors. Smart cities is about, do you understand the soul of the city? Are you managing the soul of the city for the future of the city and for the citizens? And then you look for smart policy, smart planning, smart regulations, and then at the end of it, you ask the question, is there something that technology can do to enhance what it is that we're trying to do? And if you do start with technology as a first point of view, I'm almost sure to tell you that every one of the first projects where we started with technology have failed, because we will come up with something that is very nice and fancy, but not one that is useful for the citizens and for society. So that's the first point that I do want to make. Second one I do want to bring up is that India faces a very different challenge of smart cities compared. I just flew in this morning at 1 o'clock from Slovenia, and then I drove from Bangalore to here for this particular speech. And I will tell you that Slovenia, even though it came out of communist and socialist rule, has a very different starting point than, say, India. And if you consider India's challenges and why it is so difficult, why it is that I appreciate the politicians tremendously, notwithstanding all the dysfunctions that go along with it, is that the challenge in India is a wicked problem. There is no simple solution for India's problem because it's generated over centuries. So you have the world's, 60% of the world's defecators are in India. And when you consider that as a challenge, along with the healthcare issues, along with the education crisis, when you consider that, then we're trying to talk about how we bring India into the 21st century. We're trying to solve for the 18th century problems that Slovenia has already solved, that France has already solved, that many of the countries that we worked in has already solved. But in India, those are the present and your problems, which is you can't talk about a smart city when your citizens are struggling for the basic things. And that is one of the biggest challenges. So I will talk a little bit about it, but I do want to give a bit bigger context as to why it is not appropriate to compare what we're going to do in France, or what we're doing in Japan, or what even we're doing in China to what we would try to do here in India. Because India, the march of progress is not a straight line. It's like the march of a drunkard. It goes into false alleys and then you come out of it. But I do think that we will get through it for one simple reason, that we do have a great entrepreneurial class in India and a good, big democratic society that will allow it to happen. So that is important. I do want to end by, before I go to my slides, I do want to say one thing that I have been constantly talking, where I would like for Pondichéry and for the civic society and the leaders of the civic world here in Pondichéry to consider, which is when we talk about made in India, when we talk about manufacturing, which is needed, I would argue that there is a new industry that has emerged, which is larger than the first two industries that came out of the digital world, which is technology services and engineering services. India dominated that. But the third service industry, which is about urban services, the management of city, is going to be a $6 trillion worldwide industry. And I would argue that India should look at it not as how am I going to solve the problems of Pondichéry, how am I going to solve the problems of Bangalore, how am I going to solve the problems of Coimbatore, but as in so doing, can I create the next Infosys, the next Wipro that is going to be the global leader on urban services. So I'm going to give you some examples of why that is possible, why we have a window to do it, why there's a company by the name of Cisco, which has got a big facility here, but Cisco is one of the world's largest urban services company, and we could create 10 Ciscos in India out of Pondichéry, at least 2 or 3 that drives the economy, and it uses Pondichéry as a living lab for being a smart city for all emerging countries and beyond. So that's my basic thesis. And so let me just say, how did we decide that this is a huge topic? There are 3 major trends that are taking place in the world, and they are colluding and also coming together in many ways. The first one is the social and demographic shift. 8 years ago, we started seeing these trends, and we said, Cisco is less than 30 years. We were $400 million in revenue in 1993 when my former CEO took over. Today, we passed 50 billion, and we have 60 billion of cash in the bank. But we are not going to be around for the next 30 years, and definitely not for the next 100 years, if we don't take attention to these 3 trends. The first one is the macro trend, the demographic shifts, and the economic shift, which is why we put our second headquarters in Bangalore. When we started 8 years ago, when I came here, we were about 1,000 people. Today we have crossed 15,000, and we employ 30,000 people in India, just in our ecosystem. Because we believe for India and from India is the next idea that we have to have when it comes to this area. So the first one, I'll come to this number because all of us are aware of it, but we may not be aware of how big this number implications might be. Second one is economic. And therein is this big thing called urbanization that I'm going to cover. And when you think about it, the overwhelming scale of opportunity and challenge is if you put those 2 together, how do we get out of it? And this is where we come in, where I'm seeing all the youngsters sitting on the top. They will drive the future of this, which is technology. And that technology has dramatically changed. It is no longer the technology of 4 years ago, and what we're going to see in 4 years is not even close to what we currently have. So I want to talk a little bit about these 3 trends and the context of global, and then go into some examples. And I'll try to be as practical on the examples. But it is one of those things I am suggesting, it may not be practical, it is what we have to create. And creation is what I'm going to talk about. What could we create if we had the political will? If you look at aging, and elderly, and shrinking, and growth population, the world in 2000, 6.8% were over the age of 65. By 2050, 16% will. If you look at France is going to be almost 40% over the age of 65. Germany is going to be almost 40% over the age of 65. But France and Germany are going to shrink by 16%. When you shrink by 16% and 35 to 40% of your population is over 65, your GDP is not going to be able to sustain your quality of life and your standard of living. It's as simple as that. In that context, then you look on the extreme right and you look at Russia, it's going to shrink by 21%, and Japan is going to shrink by almost 20%. If you look at the growth and you look at countries like India, which is going to grow by 55% over the next 25 years, and you look at Saudi Arabia, it's going to grow by 110% over the next 25 years, Nigeria, Iraq, Ethiopia, Congo, Yemen, Afghanistan. There's a very simple story. If you look at the migration issues in Europe, and I have been going to Europe for quite some time now, going into Berlin and Hamburg and Slovenia. Slovenia is the front entry for all the migration, which is why the Prime Minister had called me in 6 months ago saying, what do we do? And yesterday I met with the Prime Minister and the President, and my message was, you can't do much about it other than to shape it. Because the fact of the matter is the migration issues in Europe is going to continue. It has nothing to do with the Syrian war. It has everything to do with urbanization. These people who are sitting on the extreme right are going to move into these countries. But unless you manage that, we are going to see some terrible and tremendous upheaval in the economic and social society, because they are going to have people with different lifestyles and different expectations. So this is one that is a tremendously interesting and important dynamic. Now you look at the next one, which is economic. If you look at the world's top 10 economies from 1820, India and China were the first and number one, number two with almost over 45%. By 1999, US had 30% of the top 10 GDP in share. India dropped off, China drops to 3.4. I just want you to look at 2010, China comes to number 2. But look at 2050, by all estimates, India and China will be very, very big. It's going to be over almost 1/3 of the world's GDP. And if you look at the top 10, there's going to be just one European country on that list, Germany. This is going to be in the top 10. UK, France, Italy, all drops off in terms of percentage. If you're a business person, and you want to be relevant in 50 years, you got to know how to compete and how to succeed and how to work in Mexico and how to work in Brazil and Indonesia and India and China. So when you put this in the context of the global economy, this is the stark reality that we have to work with. Now, what does this all mean? Today, as we speak, in this 1 hour that we're going to spend here, 10,000 people will leave a rural area and go into a city every hour, every day for the next 36 years. Which means to sustain that urbanization, we have to create one London every month for the next 36 years. That is the challenge of urbanization and construction and creating smart cities. It is one London every month for the next 36 years. There is no way you're going to do that, and you cannot create the London the way you created London before. We have to rethink. So one of the things is to ask yourself the question, why are people moving? No one leaves a rural area to go into a village to live in a slum because they want to leave the village. It's because of lack of urban services in the village. Lack of education, lack of jobs, lack of culture, lack of healthcare. So the question to ask is, if you could take education, healthcare, jobs into the village and the rural areas, what percentage of those people will actually want to pick up and move their families in? And today with the digital world, with the digitization, what you have to first start to say, time and space dimensions of everything is no longer needed. Even today we say, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go to shop. I'm going to go to the doctor. In fact, we even say, I'm going to go to Google this. Question, why do you need to go to Google this anyway? Google will come to you, as it is. Why do you need to go to the doctor for your follow-up when the doctor can be transformed digitally to you? So it is in that context that I want to say, this is how we should be thinking about smart cities, not trying to resolve the questions of urbanization the old way, doing the same old thing because you're not going to get it done. So, in that context, I ask a different question. What if you had affordable infrastructure, that is digital infrastructure, would we do things differently? I'm going to ask a question for all of us to think about. If you had unlimited computing at a reasonable price, if you had unlimited storage at a reasonable price, if everything was connected to everything, would you do healthcare the same way? Would you do education the same way? Would you run a city the same way? Would you run your life the same way? And the answer is no. So let's look at some of those things and some of the projects we're working on. And then we have to think about how do we scale this. I just want to give you some statistics. Again, all of us live this, but if you're in my industry, which is technology, I want you to think about my life trying to sell technology with these dynamics at work. This is computing. I've just taken the lifestyle from 1992 to 2015. In 1992, for 1 meg of processing, we used to charge $222. Now it is 4 cents, and actually now it's dropping down to 3 to 2 cents. This is 2015. In 2016, we're down to 3, and by next year it'll be free. For 1 meg. For 1 gigabyte of storage, in 1992, we were charging $569 for 1 gigabyte. Now it is basically 3 cents by 2016. And by the way, it's almost zero. By the way, if you have Google, Gmail, you have Yahoo, it's free. And then you come to bandwidth. This is one area where India has to proceed, and maybe with Geo and all the other deployments that are here. But worldwide, it has gone down from 1200 Mbps in 1998 to 2016, which is less than $1.63. So the world of an infrastructure that is digital, that is affordable, is here. Now we got to figure out what to do with it. And that is where we have to think about business models. But I'm going to give one more context, which is where we come in to a certain extent. Today, 80% of the world's internet, anywhere in the world, 80% of the world's internet will go through a Cisco router. So any email, any website, anything that you do on the internet, 80%, we see it, either through a router or through a switch. So if there's one area that we're qualified to talk about, is the internet. We are the plumbers of the internet. And so if you look at it, this is where the world is going to be 2020. There's going to be 50 billion smart objects. The inflection point is already passed where there are more smart objects than people. I'll just give one context of how interesting this problem might be. Do you know how many toothbrushes are sold in the world? Year? Toothbrush. Little over 3 billion a year. Do you know how many cell phones are sold in the world? Little over 6.5 billion. So there are people who don't know how to brush their teeth with a brush, but they have a cell phone. Therein is the most interesting challenge and the most depressing fact that there are people in India, people in Africa, people in Latin America who have access to the internet, to a phone, before they have access to clean water, clean electricity, healthcare, and education. And there's nothing more dangerous than the demographic dividend of India, than young children at the age of 18 and 20 who have access to the internet, where they know what the options are out there without having an access to healthcare, education, jobs, and an aspiration for a future. And by the way, you cannot say, I got another year to work on it, because the children are not saying, I'm going to stay young for one more year. I will stay at 14 till you get your act together. They are going to get older, angrier, without any aspiration. And that is one of the biggest challenges, because in India, 450 to 550 million children in rural areas have one teacher in the entire school. 80 to 90% of all teachers are in cities, 80 to 90% of all doctors are in cities. And this is true in Africa. The entire sub-Saharan Africa's IT investment is less than the city of Manhattan. There is more investment in IT in the city of Manhattan than all of sub-Saharan Africa. So in that context, when you look at smart cities and smart objects, soon we're going to get to a world where everything is connected to everything. But here's the kicker. We are no longer in the open data world. We keep talking about big data, open data. We are way past big data and open data. We're into big video and open video. Because 90% of the internet is going to be video based. What does that mean? It means your access to healthcare, education should be driven by video, not by the old traditional way of thinking about open data. So, I have to ask Joe, keep me in track, okay? 10 more minutes. Because they say that I suffer from stage fright. I'm afraid to get off the stage. So I do know that you have to go for a meeting, so I'm going to go a little faster now. But I did want to set the stage to say there is a way of controlling this, and this is where we say there is a $19 trillion economy to be created in the next 10 to 20 years. $19 trillion economy. And that is by rethinking healthcare, rethinking education, rethinking governance, rethinking entertainment, and rethinking what citizens of the future will have. 19 trillion. This is what we are working, my team works globally. This is what gets me excited. I travel 20 days a month, but when I go all the way from Slovenia into an India or into Japan or into China, we see opportunities for how those 400 million children, whether it is in Latin America, whether it's in Africa, whether it is in the slums of Rio, where we have already started working, how we can transform their lives. And I just want to give a couple of examples of what we are doing and how we should be rethinking it and where we could be collectively thinking about the future. Now, so the question we should be asking is not the traditional way. So the first one I want to ask is healthcare. Why do we need to go to the doctor? Our research shows that for 80% of a doctor's visit, the doctor himself or herself does not need to touch you. a technically qualified person has to touch you. The stethoscope is analog. It is outdated. We should be having digital stethoscope. Your beds should be wired and censored. So when you're lying on the bed in a hospital, your body vitals should be transmitted regularly and automatically into a system that goes in and monitors to say whether you're up or down and what can happen. By the way, we're doing that. There's 1 million patients in America, 1 million ICU patients in America that are being observed and monitored out of Chennai. Because there's a shortage of nurses and doctors in second-tier cities in America. So what we did was we wired all the beds, wired and digitized all the instruments, and now you have a nurse and a doctor sitting in Chennai monitoring the patient. When a patient looks to be in bad condition, they send a signal to the doctor and the nurse at the desk at the hospital, say, you need to go in. They can do it with less doctors, less patients, than having to move doctors into France or into America. So when you think about that, I will also say the biggest internet is not here yet. The biggest internet is going to the internet of you. Today when you get up in the morning, the only thing that tells you whether your health is different is nothing. You don't know if you're healthier today than you were yesterday. The only thing you do is you stand on a scale. It tells you whether you've gained weight or lost weight. For heart attacks, 50% of the heart attacks, the first symptom is death. Not much of a symptom when your body's already been signaling to you for the last 4 hours, you're going to die in a few hours. If your body is censored, you have a thing, that is a phone or something else that monitors and signals that send automatic messages to your doctor's office, to the ambulance, and even to you to say, you need to get out now. Cancer. You detect cancer in 100 million cells, which takes 5 to 7 years. It's always by accident. And yet, your body, the DNA and all the fluids that are coming out is telling you you have a cancer. It's a data problem. So today what we do is, in that particular scale, we have come up with little pills that are camera. The one on the top right is a camera that you take a pill, it goes to your body every day, just takes a digital picture, constantly monitoring you and sending messages if you have a history of cancer in your family. That little child is completely sensorized to know whether her hearing and all the other data functions are normal. And the most important thing is that an older person does not need to go to the doctor for follow-ups, especially to a hospital. If an older person goes, they come back with an illness they didn't have, that they had when they go in. So you can take them off the street and the doctor can come in on medicine. These are things that are now. And the last one I want to say is the M-water. NASA technology that you can download today, that on your phone you can monitor the health of the water and collect and crowdsourcing whether your water is pure. You don't need to spend $1 million anymore. It's 99 cents to monitor the quality of the water. Dynamics are different. Education. This is one of the most interesting things. I'm going to use 2 examples on education. There's one I'm going to use that's personal over here. There's an organization called Agastya. Anyone of you have heard of Agastya here? It's formed out of Bangalore, formed by an investment banker. Their focus is science and education for children in the rural areas. And by that I mean children in the really rural areas. Today, after many years, they have children out of that rural areas where their parents probably never saw a paper, wrote a paper in their life. They're going in and winning the Intel science competition here in India and globally. Another example. This is one that we work with, and this is one that I find very exciting. Oh, I took the slide out. So let me just give the example. Hershey, Pennsylvania, those of you who know Hershey chocolate, they get the cocoa from Ghana. In Ghana, little children work on coffee plantation and cocoa plantations. All the World Health Organization will say the child should not be working, but the parents will say the child doesn't work, we don't get to eat. You can sit back there thinking about all the wonderful things, but my child is going to work. The time difference between America and Ghana was such that we went in and started working with Hershey, and we connected the Hershey, Pennsylvania schools with the Ghanaian cocoa plantation schools. And all the kids in the Ghana plantation of Hershey are being taught by the same teacher who's teaching the white children in Hershey, Pennsylvania, working on projects together with immersive collaborative technology. I want you to think, in 16 years, that child in Hershey, Pennsylvania is not going to look at an African child as a foreign person. So this is where we have to rethink. We are doing this in Bangalore. Out of Bangalore, my company, about 10,000 of our engineers are actually teaching children in Raichur and the others using video conferencing and high immersive technology. People do want to contribute. You can't expect them to pick up from a city and go into a rural area and live there, but they are willing to spend a few hours and some amount of money. I do want to talk a couple of things on traffic, but before I do that, I just want to say in Korea, for example, 3% of the GDP spent on tutoring for English and science. They spend $15 billion for English education alone, over and above the public education. 500,000 families have a father or a mother not living in their family in Korea, but with a child in an English-speaking school so that child can learn English. So we connected Songdo and Seoul with all the Korean American young kids who are born and raised in America, in Los Angeles and the others, saying, you can teach a Korean child English and you will make several $700 because a Korean teacher teaching English in Korea makes $3 million a year. I'm sure there are teachers in France who want to teach French, teachers who want to teach music, and do this in a highly immersive way and create a new global system of transporting education across the boundaries. The next one I want to talk about is, I'll cover, traffic is one I want to talk about. 40 to 60% of all traffic in a big city, whether it's Chicago, France, London, 40 to 60% between the hours of 4 and 7 are people looking for parking spaces. An average Parisian spends 4 years of their life looking for a parking space. There are some of you smiling because you're doing that. Now, if you could sensorize all the parking spots, open that, put it into an app when you're driving in and say, I got to go to this location, which is the closest parking space that is open, how many of you are willing to pay a little bit more when you're in a busy time to go to an office or for a doctor's visit or some others? You change the dynamics of parking. We're doing that in Chicago and in New York and in Paris and in Nice. Nice is one that had first started that. So, traffic and then garbage cans. This is a picture from 1940s. This is how they do it today in New York. In Barcelona and we're doing this also in Lyon, but in Paris what we're doing is you're putting sensors into all of these garbage cans to say, I am full, come pick me up. I am hot, but I'm smelly, come pick me up, otherwise you don't need to come here anymore. It changes the whole traffic. So, I want to end in a couple of things by saying garbage in India. I just want to give you, this is what we have in India. 175 million kilos of garbage daily. But here's a fact, in Delhi there are 350,000 garbage rat pickers. In Bangalore there are 450,000 rat pickers. The average life expectancy of a rat picker in India is 39 years old. 35 to 40% of the babies born to a rat picker will die at birth. And they have no context. Now with Aadhaar, what two NGOs, one out of Chennai and one out of Bangalore, is doing something saying, we are going to give you an Aadhaar, we are going to give you a contact, we are going to make you a small player, and we are putting in a platform. And the platform is for everybody who's a garbage picker to go into the system and they become essentially a middleman. Kabadiwala, we brought these people up to Paris for the New Cities Foundation and gave them an award. Kabadiwalas are just creating a micro platform using technology for connecting all the back pickers and all the middlemen. You can change the dynamics of a business doing that. So India is already doing it. What India does not do, and what we need to do, is go beyond scale, beyond pilots. So I'm going to go to that final point by saying, how do we get there? So I'm going to just say one more thing. I collect Edison cylinder phonographs. So Thomas Edison is my hero. And I want to say that for me, for our kind of people, this is our holy grail, Idalia. This is how he used to listen to music. If he was born again and came to my home in Florida, he would see that and say, I played on that one. But then I said, let me show you how my daughter, Anjali and Ambika listens to. This is what they listen to. He will never see the connection between what he invented and what is here. However, in 1892, he created a company called GE, that is now called GE, and he created the electric grid. This is his patent in 1892. I want to show you what an electric grid in America looks today. Nothing has changed. And the reason for that is also the reason why we have an energy crisis. There's not been innovation, there's not been continual transformation. In order to do that, I just want to say, and end my presentation by saying there are 5 things, and without these 5 things, you do not have any chance of creating a smart city. First one is visionary leadership. Can we redefine what our city is going to be? What our citizens are going to enjoy? What is the future going to look like, and how are we going to dominate the world with what we do? Second one is to have a global standard, not a local standard. You cannot say we are too poor, we can't do it, because if you do it, you're not doing it at scale, you're not going to do it globally. You have to think globally on parking, on lighting, on water, on education, saying we're going to do it in a global standard because we're going to dominate the space. We're going to make our city and our country a living lab, and then from here we're going to create a business that is going to be delivered into other countries that need it. Smart regulations. Most of our regulations are not designed for the digital world. They're not even designed for the electronic world. It's a mechanical world. I think Chennai is running with 1847 regulations. From what I've heard from Swati and Ramesh Ramla, you would know, Mr. Reddy, you are from Chennai, you would know. Public-private partnerships and ecosystem. So I'm going to end by saying, we can't do this as a company. No city can do it as a government. It has to be true public-private partnership. True partnership with the labor unions, with the academic institutions, with the citizens, with the civic society, and government and public coming together and creating new innovations that are local. The local talent has to drive smart cities. It cannot be global companies and global thinking. It has to be local innovation. If you have these five, then we do have a chance for getting into smart cities. So I'm going to stop here. I'm sorry I went over. I saw him signaling, but I apologize for that, Governor Bedi, that I took into your time. So this is where we are. I think I'll come back again and we can go into any of these in greater detail. But I do know you have a limit on your time, so I appreciate you coming. Hopefully this is very useful in at least thinking through some areas, Lalit, but I'm happy to discuss more. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Obviously, after such a wonderful presentation, we won't let our governor go. Thank you, Anil, so much for this exceptional, inspirational talk. I will give the mic to the governor to enlighten us and maybe ask him some questions so that we can have some practical advice.
It's been absolutely an honor and a whole half an hour of learning. You triggered my mind to how do we get Pondichéry started. We need your help, we need your guidance, we need your experience, we need to start working together. When we talk about Smart Pondichéry, what does it mean? I will need this presentation to be repeated. I'll try and arrange the officials of Pondichéry to get to see this again. But you're going to go away, right?
No, I'll be back.
When are you back?
Anytime you want.
Okay, so we'll work out the date so that the officials of Pondichéry see this again. So that we can think ahead and we go back to those 5 points so that we get Pondichéry right. So I think that's my learning, is to request you to repeat it and repeat it for officers who are going to be, the bureaucracy, the public servants who are going to be work on it. Try and get the political class also to see this. So I'll try and arrange a date where the political class, the bureaucracy, and the community come together on this in this hall yet again. I think that would be the takeaway. But thank you so much. I'm sorry, without your clearance, I'm taking this information along, but we'll have to rework because that's the only way we can do it right for Pondichéry. I liked your last 5 points, because then every one of us is associated with it. I'm so grateful that Lalit invited me to meet another Lalit. Thank you so much. Wonderful indeed. So where are you going next after this? Anil, when are you going next?
I'm going to be here tomorrow for the rugs, my passion also. So we're going to have the exhibition. Then I go from here to Washington, D.C. In fact, we're going to do this in Washington, D.C. From there,
so when are you back then? If you could have that date?
I will tell you, it should be 2 weeks I should be back. But we'll find the most appropriate date. I'll come on a cooler date too.
But a very impressive hall indeed. Thank you so much. Very impressive. We're going to have a repeat here.
Thank you.
So 2 weeks from now, Anil, we'll wait for you and we'll all get together.
Thank you.
You know, from on behalf of the committee members of the Alliance Française and the staff and the personnel, we are very grateful you have come. We want to thank you, and at the same time, we already want to offer you this hall for this particular purpose, which is we keep it as a secret. We are very possessive about this hall, but for this work and your request, I'm sure the committee members are with me to offer this hall for you for doing this wonderful work on smart cities and making Pondichéry a model town.
We're offering it for Pondichéry, not me. So we've got to reconnect, listen to you again. I think that will set them thinking afresh. And we are still at that stage of design, writing out for a project called Smart Pondichéry. So what would Smart Pondichéry be? Then it gets incorporated. Then I think so it's working it together. You just come at the right time. Thank you.
With this, we'll let our Lieutenant Governor go for our next very important event. But Anil is going to be here for question answers. He has another half an hour to give you all. So if you have anything to ask him, this is the time. Once again, thank you, madam, so much.
Meanwhile, Anil, can we start a little study on this? So what could Pondichéry be? So till we meet again, maybe a little study of, let's have a little brainstorming. So when we make this presentation, if something has been thought on Pondichéry.
So, it's not accidental, but I do have a small team and they have already been looking into Pondichéry. So I will have them come back here before I'm able to do some more work.
And I take last one appeal, while the projection comes in the future is in good hands, let's join hands to clean up Pondichéry. Whatever you can do by your power of influence, get the community together. Today the government is in alignment with the community. Today I can tell you it's in alignment. The bureaucracy in the political class is in alignment to make a better Pondichéry. It's an opportunity to work together. If you had an experience of the past where you were not responded to, then that's past. Present is different. The ball is in your court. Let me tell you, the ball is now in the court of the community. We are playing our game. We are playing a game to the best of our ability. You want to increase our ability? Then join in. So therefore the ball is in your court, send the message across. There is a sincerity of purpose. So instead of saying this is not done and this is still bad, saying this is the way we will do, working together. And that's the such message. So now I'm leaving the ball in your court. Thank you.